This is Dr. Hamilton, and I'd like to introduce you to my video series on William Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. So in this video, we are just going to talk about the opening of Much Ado About Nothing, the opening lines. Shakespeare's plays are unique in that the openings are often contain a ton of information, and this is not just the typical introduction of characters and central conflicts that we find in opening scenes or a memorable opening line. This is introduction of key themes, recurring motifs, patterns of imagery, symbols, and rhetorical structures that you will find elaborated on throughout the rest of the play. And so after you've read the play carefully, going back and looking at those opening lines often will light up ideas for you and connections and just really enhance your understanding of the play. So how does Much Ado About Nothing begin? Well, it begins with Leonardo, who is the governor of Messina, which is a town in Sicily, and he has encountered a messenger who has told him that Don Pedro, the Prince of Aragon, is coming to Messina. And Don Pedro has just had a very successful battle, and so he's bringing his officers essentially on a kind of vacation to Messina. So we're going from war to peace, or what we think is going to be peace, right at the start of the play. And coming along with him is Claudio, who will be introduced as kind of the romantic lead of the play. And he's a young man who we hear has been very, very successful in battle and impressed Don Pedro greatly. And also Benedict, who is another a little bit older officer with Don Pedro. And both of them are unmarried. And so you can see how these unmarried bachelors coming to Messina is setting up romantic plots right at the beginning of the play. So let's read these opening lines, and then discuss them. Leonardo says, "I learn in this letter that Don Pedro of Aragon comes this night to Messina." Messenger, "He is very near by this. He was not 3 leagues off when I left him. How many gentlemen have you lost in this action? But few of any sort, and none of name." And then the messenger goes on to describe the great feats of Claudio, how he has shown great promise in battle. "He hath borne himself beyond the promise of his age, doing in the figure of a lamb the feats of a lion." So, again, this already has set up Claudio as the eligible bachelor of the play. This is a comedy, a Shakespearean comedy, and so Shakespearean comedies are always romantic plots. And so we already have, our romantic lead, this young hero from the war. But in this phrase, doing in the figure of a lamb, as a young man, and we find out later that Claudio doesn't have a beard, so he's quite young. The feats of a lion. We have the beginning also of a pattern of animal imagery that will recur throughout the play. And the play will be full of imagery that is fun, cartoonish almost, of people metamorphosing into animals. This is part of the comedy. And there will be also an undercurrent, though, of people metamorphosing into animals, in the sense that they lose control of their reason and they become bestial. This is a pattern of imagery that in Shakespeare is called bestialization, and it certainly is prolific in this particular play. So we already have Claudio converting in our imagination into a lamb and then transforming into a lion. This also sets up, a similar kind of imagery that suggests that Claudio may not be exactly what he appears to be. He appears to be innocent, but he may have some ferocity and fierceness and animalistic, bestial kind of energy to him. And so we will find out later on that Claudio is quite insecure, and he will easily be led to believe that the woman that he courts is sleeping with another man, and this imagery of he will quickly become bereft of reason and converted into a kind of wild animal who really wants to just tear her apart. And he does so not physically but verbally at her wedding, in one of the most sort of disturbing, upsetting wedding scenes that probably was ever written. He believes that she has cheated on him, and he denounces her in front of her father and her and his friends and everyone. So he's done in the figure of a lamb the feats of a lion. So we have the pattern of imagery that will develop later on. And we learn that Claudio's uncle lives in Messina, and Claudio's uncle has a sort of response to him, which kind of reminds us of the response that people have at weddings, actually. He feels, when he hears that Claudio has come back to Messina, he feels so much joy that it says, even so much that joy could not show itself modest enough without a badge of bitterness. And so he feels so much joy that there's actually kind of mixture of joy and bitterness in his feeling about Claudio. Now, this may well set up the feeling that he's so proud of Claudio for his triumph in war, but also that he sees that he's growing up, and there's a bit of a bitterness, a bit of sadness. He's no longer a child. He's now a war hero. But what this sets up is the mood and the tone of the play. The play is really could best be described as a tragedy averted by comedy. The romantic plot with Claudio, who courts Hero and then is overpowered by feelings of jealousy and humiliates her at his wedding, is really a potentially tragic plot that is saved by a comic plot. And there's two comic plots. The first is the subplot with Beatrice and Benedict that will be introduced in a moment, and the other is a subplot of these clownish police officers, local police officers, the constables, who actually totally inadvertently almost save the day, save Claudio really from his own nasty delusions, really. So this is a play that will have a mixture of tones. It will have a potentially tragic tone. It will be about a romance and all the serious feelings of vulnerability and hurt feelings and the fear of humiliation that comes with love. And then it will have this wonderful comic elements that are embodied in Beatrice and Benedict, which we'll describe in a moment, and in Dogberry, who is the comedic police officer who saves the day. So we hear also that Claudio's uncle has been so overjoyed that he's burst out into tears. And what Leonardo says about this is this phrase: "How much better it is to weep at joy than to joy at weeping." And what does Leonardo mean by this? Well, I mean, he says that it's so much better that that he's so joyful that he's on the verge of tears, or that he is crying. And how much better that is than to be a nasty, malicious person who gets enjoyment out of watching other people's suffering. Well, we will find out that there's two key figures in the play, Don Pedro and Don John. And these are two figures that really vie for power in the play and predominance in the play. Don Pedro, it could be said, brings people together, and wants people to be brought together, even though he himself is single, doesn't have a wife, isn't in a romantic relationship. He wants people to come together, and he actually senses that Claudio is insecure and inexperienced, and he actually decides to help Claudio court Hero, the woman that he is in love with, by pretending to be him at a masked party, and he does. He courts her successfully, and then Don John's brother, who is somebody who plots and schemes to tear people apart. So Don Pedro is someone who weeps at joy, might be said to weep at joy, and Don John, somebody who definitely joys at weeping. So we have right in those opening lines, the key thematic contrast established. So we have a play about romantic love. It's a comedy. We know it's about romantic love, but now at the very beginning, we know that the romantic love is going to be on the backdrop of war. And the relationships formed in war, which are friendships, loyalty, trust between men, is going to be set up in contrast to the relationships that are formed in love. And love will be viewed in some sense as a kind of apostasy, as a kind of betrayal of those male relationships. But in another sense, it will be viewed as a transcendence of those relationships. But the imagery, even though the war is only referred to a couple times indirectly and once quite directly, it will be there as a backdrop because it's established the central relationships between these key male characters in the play. And it will form how they experience and view love. We have the introduction of the pattern of war imagery is also introduced, the pattern of animal imagery, which will culminate in Claudio's meltdown. I'll give you a taste of this at the wedding, in which he says to Hero, he denounces her. He thinks that she's cheated on him, and he screams at her, "You seem to me as Diane in her orb." Diane is the goddess of chastity. As chaste as is the bud ere it be blown. But you are more intemperate in your blood than Venus or those pampered animals that rage in savage sensuality. So he accuses her of being like the pampered animals that rage in savage sensuality, whereas Claudio in that moment actually has abandoned his reason, as Beatrice will comically accuse Benedict of in a few lines. Abandoning his four of his wits, 5 wits have halted off, she says, and only one has remained to distinguish him as a reasonable creature from his horse. This is exactly what happens to Claudio. 4 of his 5 wits have halted off, maybe 5 of his 5 wits, and in accusing Hero, he himself has become a savage animal. Imagery of bestialization. We have the tone of the play, which will be tragic-comic, with the comic clearly and definitely winning out. We have the 2 rivals, the 2 brothers, almost like God and the devil, Don Pedro and Don John, who sort of divide up the play between them, and the play could be seen as a contest between Don Pedro and Don John for ascendancy, the forces of harmony against the forces of disharmony, the weeping at joy, which is the wedding, and life continuing through children on into the future, and joying at weeping, which is really the destruction of life. So that's just the first 30 lines of the play. So in the next video, we'll discuss the opening scene in a little bit more detail. All right, thanks everybody.